This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 170 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Make sure you're doing these things for me. Like the show, subscribe to the channel at Subway to Shea. I see everyone starting to pile into the room. Make sure you're following on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. Make sure you're following me on X at AntRivera86 and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. We got a good show for you today. A little tea leaves have been dropped on what's been going on with the Juan Soto sweepstakes and the Mets meeting with them. We'll get into that later on in the show, but I got a guest today that's going to start us off. Jerome McCroy. You know him as J Mac Customs, in the house here joining me today. You can follow him on X at JMac Customs. Check out the website, jmaccustoms.com, because you want to get your OMG sign from him for sure. Jay, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the intro. I appreciate you having me on today.
Absolutely. So great to have you on. And, I wanted to get you on because your sign, the OMG sign, getting into the Hall of Fame, the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, that sign that you got, you made a couple of them. That one going to the Cooperstown is going to be the sign from the pitchers that they were holding in the dugout. Then you got the other sign from when the hitters were, launching balls out of the park. That one's going to be at Citi Field at the Mets Hall of Fame. It'll be displayed in Cooperstown at the I think it's called the Your Team Today exhibit. So they have all the stuff that's happening around now. And how did the sign, first come up for you? Because I know the OMG design with the shirt and everything that Jose Iglesias did with his song that came out. When did you decide that it was time to make the sign?
I was watching the interview with Francisco Alvarez and Eduardo Perez on Sunday Night Baseball, Mets against the Cubs. Was it June 24th, if I'm not mistaken? That's Sunday night, or June 23rd. It was that night. During the interview, Eduardo had asked Francisco which was more prominent for them. Was it OMG or was it the Grimace? And when Francisco said OMG, how he lit up about it, I was like, that's got to be the next sign that I make, right? And I deliberated about different design concepts, and then Jose made it easy. Came to the park with a shirt on, and I'm like, it had this neon blue and green. It kind of popped off the shirt. I'm like, that's the one. I'm going to render that and make a sign out of it. So that was on Wednesday, the 26th, that I saw the shirt for the first time. I saw both him and Alex Cohen wearing it. And I also saw that he gifted it to the rest of his teammates. And on that Friday morning, the day the song came out, I went into the shop super early at like 7 a.m., cut the sign, sanded it, spray painted it, coated it, put it together. And I was at the ballpark about 3:30. Anxious to go to the game and maybe bring these signs, hope to get them on TV, hope to somehow manage to give one to the team. And serendipitously, it happened. Meeting Alex Cohen in the K corner. She asked me what I was doing with the sign, and I asked her if she could help me out by bringing it to the team. And she said, I'll do it if you sign it, because I want to make sure that they know it's coming from a fan and not somebody who we hired to do it. And the rest was history. It just became this phenomenon, and it couldn't have happened, more storybook, if you will. I mean, it's one of those things where I made the sign, and I had no intention of it being what it became. I thought it was just going to sit in the clubhouse, or maybe, sit in Jose's apartment. But it wound up becoming this home run trophy, this home run celebration tool. And yeah, it's super exciting. And I'm really happy to see, obviously, how it was connected to the success of the team this year.
And like, just that feeling now to know that kind of like you're kind of going to be immortalized. I know it's all about the OMG, but you created this thing. You created this sign that they used throughout the season. Fans had them in the stands. The fact that it gets to be immortalized in Cooperstown, that just has to be another notch in this entire season for you.
No, I mean, I mean, it is for sure. I mean, every season I look at with, I kind of rank seasons, and it's hard for this not to be my favorite season of all time because of my own personal connection to it. I was too young for the '86 World Series to mean as much as what this meant to me because even though we fell short of making it to the World Series, how this team fought, how this team rose up and didn't give up, like I identify with that. I've changed careers and moved through different parts of my life with kind of starting over, and that the end of May was like a starting over point for us, being 22 and 33, and having to kind of pull ourselves out from 11 games under 500. um, I really identify with that, and just seeing the fight that we had, and the amount of comeback wins that we had, and the walk off home runs, and the winning in the last out, if you will, or pushing pushing ourselves out of being against the wall. Just something about it that's just it's so magical, and I'm grateful, and it'll always have a lasting memory in my heart. But to be in the Hall of Fame, like I think every artist wants some type of validation of something that they do, and I think it's the ultimate form of validation. And how I feel about it, it's really hard to explain. There's been times throughout the season where I've 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 laughed really hard. There's been times throughout the season that I've cried just out of tears of joy. Like the night that it happened, like I woke up to my wife, because I didn't see her the night that OMG first happened on June 28th, and with the concert and the first time that it appeared. I had like 500 Twitter messages. I was up to like 4 o'clock in the morning responding to people who I've never even talked to before, in my life, and they want to know about OMG, and they want to hear from me. And when my wife woke up that morning, because she went to bed and I didn't sleep in bed. I didn't want to wake her up that night. I got in at like something like 1:30 or whatever it was, because it was a real late night. Um, I talked to her. I was like, "You gotta see what happened last night." And I had messaged her about it, but she had no idea about the messages that I got from Twitter, and the requests to be on CBS and SNY. And we just had a moment, and I broke down crying because, like, honestly, like, I think as an artist, you want to be noticed, you want to be recognized, you want to have people appreciate the work that you do, and to have something linked to my favorite baseball team, a team that I've watched since I'm 10 years old. Um, it's immeasurable how it made me feel.
You talk about all the magic moments and all the special moments that happened this season, and the Mets had so many rallying cries, right? You see
Yeah,
Wiener rally, Pimp, Grimace,
yeah,
Izzy, Glizzy, and of course, OMG. You look back, and is this something that you think? Probably not all of them, but can you think this is something that can carry over into next season, or do we lock that in the vault for 2024, and now it's time to find a new rallying cry to get behind?
yeah. Listen, I've been asked this question a lot, and I think a lot of it depends on what the team dynamic is going to be and what the team wants to do. I certainly think that it's not something that can be forced. It's not something like where I can say, "Oh, I'm going to make another slogan or another sign," and we'll do that. But OMG, I think that if you think about um, how it became a catalyst, or it was part of a catalyst of a turnaround, before the sign even happened. It was something that took place in the clubhouse. It was something that took place in the clubhouse. We all know the stories of how it was played, during times of them winning, and after every victory, they're playing it after every home run, and it also became Jose's walk-up song. We only really got truly introduced to it on the day of its release, but they had about a month head start. This, in fact, was also playing in Syracuse in their locker room before Jose came up, and JD Martinez and Jose were um, were talking about this song, and JD was like, "This is a banger. Like we need to somehow keep this thing going and bring it up with us to Queens." So the groundwork was already there. It was already part of the fabric of the team. We only got introduced to it at the end of June. But I think the feeling that they got, if Jose gets re-signed, I think it'll stay. I think it'll find a way to stay, but it all depends on that, and it's going to depend on what the team, what the dynamic of the team is, and whether or not they decide it. But I don't think it's going to be something that's forced from ownership. I don't think it's going to be something that's, forced from the fans. I mean, I think we're going to still see OMG signs that people purchased from last season come into the stadium, whether it's the foam signs or the neck chains or the koozies or the signs that people purchase from me. I think it'll hang around, but I think time will tell, and I think it all depends on what happens on Hot Stove.
We're talking about re-signing Jose Iglesias. Sports Nut Nick saying he wants to re-sign Jose Iglesias. I know he just went with Scott Boras and signed with Scott Boras to do his free agency. I know the Mets are going to have to be dealing with a lot of Scott Boras clients here.
Sure.
Are you 100% on bringing Jose Iglesias back? I think that he has been such an important part of not just the team, but just the aura around the franchise and the turnaround in 2024. You talk about, I guess the famous line that that Gary Cohen said at the end of the doubleheader against the Braves when the Mets clinched the playoff spot, from 0-5 to OMG, what he brought to this team coming off the bench and then kind of becoming that starting player, that role player that this team needed. He meant so much to the bottom of the lineup, defense, everything. I think it's really important to me to kind of bring him back into that kind of role that he had last year where he was such a huge role player in.
I agree. I mean, I think that we have a sense of who our leader is on the team, and it's Francisco Lindor. He's through and through. Put the team on his back this season, and obviously he has a complimentary, a captain, if you will, in Brandon Nimmo. But Jose Iglesias is right there. You know, he's got a few years on Lindor, so I think there's some wisdom there. He's a 10-year plus veteran, in the league, even though, he's had portions of his career where he was a journeyman and obviously being out of baseball all of last season. He brings something to the team that was missing. I mean, I think people not only see him as a vibes guy, but he's also a guy that, I think he's got a lot of fight in him, a lot of spirit in him. If you just think about his story about how he even got here to America, it's impressive. How do you not root for a guy like that? How do you not want a guy like that in your clubhouse that you can go, toe to toe with? And I think we bring him back. I think we bring him back in a capacity where he's there to kind of mentor some of these middle infielders that we have coming up, because we have a lot of talent and a lot of youth there, and along with that comes inexperience. So I think his mentorship will be really important for us to have, because he's the type of guy that he talks to every player. You see it before the games out there on the field, when batting practice and everything else, keeps people loose. But I think there's also a lot of like things that are technical. I mean, the guy has great hands, so having him as a double play partner for Francisco Lindor has been amazing. But also the fact that he can play a really good third base as well. He has a lot of value for us. Plus, it also helps that he hits the way that he did.
I look at as well, Jeff Cohen's mentioning this. Shout out to everyone, Nick, Jeff Cohen, Patty and NYC, Armand, everyone that's in the chat, Keith from Shea and Sons. Appreciate you guys all tuning in here and being a part of this. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you're, following JMac Customs as well. Another player that I thought was a big role player, and Jeff Cohen's mentioning this, to re-sign Jesse Winker. I think he's another component player that was so important, not only down the stretch, but in the playoffs. I mean, he came up clutch so many times, had that big home run against Philly at Citi Field. And every time he came to bat, it was such a big moment for the team. And he came through most times not.
Oh yeah. And again, is another guy who not only is a vibes guy. I mean, him and Alonso had some really cool camaraderie, plus their little home run celebration that they had with their tapping their feet together. But kind of like a take no shit attitude. I think that we could all appreciate that. The whole dust up that he had with Willie Adames during the Milwaukee series. It wasn't really a dust up, but just kind of like a war of words in the drawing. And got Adames to kind of come out of character and say, "Hey, come meet me in the parking lot." It'd be interesting if we sign them both. How do they act as teammates? Um, but yeah, I mean, he definitely brought again some of that grit that we didn't get last year at the trade deadline, or the year before, I should say, at the trade deadline. And I mean, what a find. And I hope we could find a way to re-sign him as well. Again, it's got to be about the bridge to some of these young guys that are
Right.
coming up, because you don't want to give long-term contracts to guys who are going to just hold the place for somebody who's really raw and talented and maybe be able to make a more substantial impact.
Jesse Winker was always a guy that I know he rubbed Met fans the wrong way when he was on the other side of the field, but to get him on our side and not only him play up to that and become kind of one of us, it felt like really quickly. Jesse Winker became a Met, and just the vibe and bravado that he brought to the team, that no nonsense, like you mentioned before, something that was missing from this team at last year's trade deadline, even in 2022 when the Mets were getting hit all over the field and led the team in hits, and you never saw reactions out of them. No fight back, and I feel like Jesse just brings that energy. Him and Iglesias, I think, are just two important guys that I really want to bring back to this team. Jeff Cohen also said, had the pleasure of taking a picture with you in Philly with the OMG sign as well. Patty saying it's such a great story for you, and very happy for you that your sign is going into the Hall of Fame. Armand is asking this question: if you made a sign to honor Grimace and the City Connect uniforms. I feel like you did. I feel like I saw you. Did you have a purple one?
I had a Grimace one on the same day that I made the blue and orange one.
Yeah.
I actually I used the green that was like that neon green that was on the front of the shirt. I used that as the backdrop, and I used Grimace hair. Like I ordered this Grimace hair that I overlaid on top of the OMG, and it's actually with another fan. I don't know if you guys know Metsies TM or OMG Grimace Mets on Twitter. She's part of the Metsiverse Discord that Vintage Mets put together, amazing vintage. And Tess and I, we get on pretty well in our chat. And she's like, "Can I get one of those signs? I'm sitting behind the dugout tonight," and I loaned her the Grimace one. And that night she must have been on SNY, I don't know how many times. And she's like, "Thank you so much for that." Like, I've been getting messages from people all over Twitter because of the sign. And it wasn't just about hoarding this and having it for myself. It was really about, like, when I made it to not just give it to the team, but when it became something where the team wanted to make more of them, and getting them into people's hands, it became important for me. I don't know how many I've made. It's probably got to be close to over 300 that I've made. And then there's also pins and Christmas ornaments coming out. People can't get enough of it.
Blunt thoughts. Hector saying, "Good morning, gentlemen. You don't
My
have to be the
guy.
best player or highest paid to be a leader and influential. Jose Iglesias is exactly what this team needs. You bring him back on the right terms," and I totally agree with that. Iglesias, Winker, those guys. I think at some point that David Stearns and Steve Cohen will kick high gears on the rest of this roster. But right now they're focused on Juan Soto because the Mets have finally met with Juan Soto, and news came out, I want to say around 11:30 last night. I felt like the article from John Heyman came out talking about the contingent led by Steve Cohen and a lot of high-ranking officials from the New York Mets organization that met with Juan Soto in Orange County on Saturday. Early signs were suggesting that the meeting went extremely well, and I'm just reading this from what John Heyman was saying, and the Mets remain viewed as one of the favorites for the services of Soto. So we thought this going into that, especially, knowing the money that Cohen has, but that's just not the only thing that they kind of have to sell him on. He wants to be a winning player. He wants to be on an organization that's going in the right direction. The Mets presentation, according to John Heyman, was a big production and very detailed. So they obviously poured a lot of work into this meeting. We know that the Red Sox have met with him. We know that the Blue Jays as well. The Yankees will meet with him on Monday. How much are you willing to pour into Soto? Is this the guy that you're going 100% all in on?
Um, I think if we want to be taken seriously, we have to. We have to put up the best offer. I don't want to be used as leverage to drive up his offer, which in a lot of cases in the past has happened. But I think if we want to take that next step, we got to get one of the game's brightest stars. If you look over at the model of success and what the Dodgers have done, the Dodgers have spent money to complement their players. I mean, they they gave a pretty substantial contract to Freddie Freeman at the time for first baseman, and then coupled it with a substantial contract offer to Shohei Ohtani, which was loaded with deferrals. But then they right behind it there was Yamamoto. So I don't think we have two mega signings up our sleeves. I mean, we might do both, Soto and then Burns, but I'd love to do Soto Burns and figure out a way to retain Pete, because I think that if we're getting Soto and we're losing Pete, I think this fan base is going to be divided on it. So I really think it's a very, very tough decision. And I know Ron Darling had mentioned earlier. I mean, he'd rather see us, spread the money out rather than going after one player, spread it out for a couple of players. And I think that's a very popular thought, but you don't have a chance to land an MVP caliber player of his ilk more than once in every 10 years. And I think we got to go for it.
When you look at Steve Cohen and the money he has and what he can offer Juan Soto, to me, this is kind of a win-win situation here. I mean, you get Juan Soto and now you just elevated yourself. Obviously, there's still moves to make, and I'm pretty sure the team will still make moves, but now you have that, superstar type talent at the top there to go along with Francisco Lindor, who's a superstar in his own, his own right as well. We'll see what they do with the rest of the team, but it kind of shows, going all the way to the NLCS, that the Mets were, just not satisfied enough, are ready to take it to the next level, ready to get to a World Series here. On a scale, of 1 to 10, how confident are you with everything that we've heard so far? Not much that has been said, but what we know, how confident are you that the Mets can land Juan Soto?
I think it's 50-50. Um, I feel like if we were going into last season with trying to obtain one, so if this was a year ago, I think our chances would have been at 10% at best. I think we moved the needle very well with the organizational moves between having Mendy being here for a full season and the success that we had in year one, knowing kind of where he came from. Having David Stearns, be our president of baseball operations, and what he brings to the table. I really feel like I feel like there's a really good situation for him to come in organizationally, where the organization's not in flux like it has been in the years past, because I think that's what also pushed people away.
Money aside from what Steve Cohen has, if you're at that meeting, what is your pitch to convince Soto to come here to Queens?
Um, what is the pitch? You get to be in the centerpiece of a lineup and be part of this amazing dynasty in the making. You'll be part of our core four. Your name, you're gonna see the benefit right away, where when you see, you know, 5,000 Dominican flags in left field, and in right field for you. Um, you're gonna definitely see, a big shift in what you felt Queens is already like. He's already gone on record saying how much he loves to play in Queens. So I can imagine the presentation would be about, showing hundreds or even thousands of Dominican flags waving throughout the right field and left field, and chanting his name. And listen, I think that it really just it comes down to legacy. And I don't know if for him, like, what his ego means, but I think a lot of times when these presentations are made, you're playing up to someone's ego. And when you have a guy who you could say to him, listen, your legacy will be firmly intact for taking the New York Mets to a championship. I think it's a lot different than being one of the guys who's on the Yankees, because they already have an elite player in Aaron Judge. You have a chance to be really 1A instead of 1B. Even though Francisco Lindor is our 1A right now, but I think Juan Soto, if you look at his production offensively, it's a step above what Lindor gives us. No disrespect to him, because he also plays elite defense where Juan Soto doesn't. I think Juan Soto's offensive production makes up for any lack that he gives us defensively.
Patty in NYC doesn't buy into the line about the winning stuff, which Scott Boras was the one who said, he's looking to be a part of a winning team. We all know that money is a huge part of this whole situation. And, when I look at what the Mets, have to offer aside from money, because obviously Steve Cohen has the most money, more than the Yankees, more than you could combine some owners and he still has more money than them.
Right.
But, I'm looking at the youth on the Mets side here with Vientos and Alvarez coming into their own. Obviously, Nimmo and Lindor in their primes, and they're going to be a part of this team. Obviously Lindor for the next 8-9 years, Nimmo 5-6 years. They'll always have money to contend. And, just the atmosphere that they brought together in 2024, which you never really saw in the past. A lot of it was, LOL Mets. We heard from other players about how the atmosphere in the clubhouse was not great. And it really feels that this team has turned the corner when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, the middle finger up and thumbs down Mets from the early days of signing or acquiring Francisco Lindor, the Javi Baez days. I think we're long past that. I think that there was a maturation process that took place within that clubhouse, not just for him, but for a guy like Nimmo as well, who didn't really, I wouldn't say who didn't really have a voice or didn't really use his voice, but now seems to be part of that too. So, I think that a lot happened from that meeting at the end of May last year, where they decided, like, hey, you know what, we're better than this, and we need to hold each other accountable. I think that could be replicated regardless of who's in the room, but you win with who's in the room too. You got to have the horses, and making it an attractive place and doing that. I mean, if you just look at the atmosphere that Citi Field is, what we experienced as fans, like, what player wouldn't want to see that? I mean, there's a lot of other teams that do the light shows. The Yankees one, no, if there's any Yankee fans that are in this chat room, I'm not trying to diss the Yankees, but it wasn't it. I saw it live over in Milwaukee. It wasn't it. I didn't feel anything, but to hear ours and the ominous music and please stand clear of the closing doors that's being replicated, like, that's a fun vibe, coupled with all the cool things that we do, for the fan experience. Like, who wouldn't want to play here?
I totally agree. I thought I wasn't going to be a biggest fan of the light show when they first announced it. You watch it on TV when other teams do it. Like, I saw Baltimore do it. I saw them do it in Atlanta, and I'm like, man, this bothers my eyes. I don't know if I'll enjoy this. But the way that the Mets put it together, like you said, with the stand clear of the closing doors, it just all worked. Edwin Diaz's entrance, everything just worked for this team and how they put together their production, not only on the field, off the field, the fan experience, coming to the games beforehand, and there being a lot of activities to do, especially during the playoffs. The fact that they did these, and I don't know if you went to any of them, but during the playoff games, during the away games, they did the watch parties. I think that was another added element that was, awesome to see. And I think that just entirely the way that Cohen has shaped this organization since coming onto the job and taking ownership in 2021, I think it's been a great sign to see of the turnaround that this franchise has done and what it has become, for sure. I want to get into some other things here as well, and I'm trying to see where the comment was. Going back,
there's a lot of great comments here.
There's definitely a lot of great comments in the chat here. You know what? We're going to come back to some of them. I did star some of them. I just wanted to mention, too, that Carlos Beltran had a comment not too long ago to Spanish reporters. I think he was at a charity event, and he talked about, in quote, the Mets want to improve the team, and there's no doubt they'll go after all the players on the market, knowing the piece the whole world wants is Juan Soto, and the Mets won't hesitate to go after him full blast. So he's 100% on board as well. He's the special assistant to David Stearns. There's been a lot of talk this week, and I want to get into this topic here of, if the Mets do sign Juan Soto, where do they go after that? Do they go after Pete Alonso and bring him back, which is the move I want to do? But also there's been talk about Willie Adames as well. And, I look at the seasons they had. Pete Alonso, probably his worst statistical season, as a New York Met, definitely with runners in scoring position as well. It's been a tough year for him. 240, still hit 34 home runs, 88 RBI. So you look at that and you're like, man, this still looks good. 788 OPS, 2.6 WAR. You look at Willie Adames, 251, had 32 homers, 112 RBIs, 21 stolen bases, a 3.1 WAR, and a 794 OPS. When it comes to these two scenarios here, I know for me it's Soto and Alonso. That's the one I want. I'm not too, and Adames is a really good player, but I'm not keen on moving Mark Vientos, who played a really good third base, moving him to first to have him now learn that position, and putting Adames, who's not really played maybe more than 10 games at third base, having him at third base, not knowing how he's going to react playing that position, and then Juan Soto in right field, where we kind of know that Juan Soto is not a great outfielder, right? I mean, he's not a great defensive outfielder. So to me, it's got to be Soto and Alonso. Alonso plays good first base. I mean, he's not a Gold Glover, but he plays good defense to me.
Well, I think that's what kept him on the field. I mean, his defense, his scoop rate was among the highest in baseball. He pretty much caught everything that came his way. I think it was something about like 94%, which is pretty high. But let's not forget too, his performance in the playoffs. Without him, we do not beat Milwaukee and move into even a position to be in the NLDS. And he had something like a 999 OPS and 44 at bats during the playoffs. I mean, I think a lot of it was feast or famine. Because you had a couple of games where you had clunkers, and obviously those are the games where we got shut out, but he was still getting on base in those games. Mm-hmm. He was still getting a single or a double, taking the ball the other way. So I definitely think he really stepped up when it mattered most. So I feel like if you look at Clutch Alonso October 1st on, it was a much different place than what he was all season. And I think a lot of all the early season stuff was about him being pressing for his contract. And once you get into a hole, it's hard to dig out of it, especially when you lost.
Yeah, sports.
But I want Soto and Alonso if I can answer that as well, because I like Adames, but I don't like him enough to forego what we could have from guys who might be coming up playing those positions.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about the dynamic of the clubhouse as well. You bring in Adames, and to me, that also means I feel like Jesse Winker wouldn't come back either. I mean, I don't know what the beef was behind him. I don't know if it was just an in-game thing or whatever it was. But man, just the dynamic that this team had last year, I would at least like to try to bring some of that back. And add on to that. Patty in NYC also agrees. Soto Alonso, Soto Sports Nut Nick says Soto and Alonso is a must. And, that's where it starts for me, bringing both of those guys back. Like you said, Pete having that down year, obviously the contract had to be involved with all of that. But we know what Pete can do. We've seen the resume that he has and what he did in the postseason. It kind of cemented his legacy here. He'll always be remembered, for breaking the rookie record for home runs, for hitting a lot of big shots. And he's been clutch throughout his career, not so much this past season, but throughout his career, he's had some big clutch home runs, none bigger than the game in Milwaukee with in the ninth inning to seal the deal and help the Mets get to the NLDS. So I'm on board for bringing back Alonso. I think that's a must here. And I there's no doubt in my mind that is the right move to make, especially when you're looking at David Stearns, who's run prevention, defensive first kind of guy, move all these guys around. It's just too much to me. You already know what Alonso can do at first base. I think I can deal with Soto, and that I think the bat kind of negates what the defense is right now at this moment. He's kind of in the realm of what you would see from Starling Marte out in right field. Doesn't have as much range, but he's going to provide you with the power. He's going to provide you with that bats. He's a playoff player, and he comes up big in spots. You saw him help the Yankees get to the World Series with a big home run as well. So having those two boppers in the lineup, to me, is what the Mets should be doing here. Now, I got a couple of comments here. Actually, Sportsnut Nick actually made this good comment. Let's say the Mets don't sign Alonso. Would you sign Bregman instead? Like, I feel like this is a better move than Adames. I know Adames is younger, but you got a guy who could play third base if you're going to move Vientos over. So that's something more that I would do instead of bringing in a Willie Adames to play out of position. I have you muted. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I love that suggestion. I think you also have a guy who's battle tested and can hit in big spots in Bregman. Like that's a big name, and he's probably going to get a 3-year deal from somebody because of where he is age wise. So I would definitely do that.
Patty in NYC saying, has Sevy and Minaya rejected their qualifying offers? I know that Alonso's definitely doing that. I think it's Tuesday is the deadline for that. Minaya hasn't just yet, but he will. And the thought was, what if Luis Severino would take he was the big candidate to take it. But Will Salmon of The Athletic was saying that he's not. He won't take that offer, which would be
Right.
1 year, $21.5 million. So all going to be free agents. You look at the rotation, you're losing Sean Minaya, Jose Quintana, as well as Luis Severino. So you're kind of rebuilding this rotation. Sevy was such a huge part of this team, a huge part of the turnaround, especially in the second half. Finished the season 11-7 with a 3.91 ERA. He had 161 strikeouts in 182 innings pitched. Had some big moments in the postseason. Would you offer Sevy a multi-year deal to return next season?
I would offer at least a 2 to 3 year deal, but I think it has to be incentive driven, and I think there also should be an opt out in there for both the player and the team. Gives him an opportunity to have not a bounce back year, but a year where he builds off his previous year. And Sevy hasn't shown that he could put together 2 back-to-back years in his career yet. Not to say that he won't, but he has to also show that. I think there's going to be a lot of buyer beware out there on the market for him. So I think this is his opportunity to get a substantial contract, but I don't think the market's going to be more than 75 million over a few years for him, like maybe 3 years, 75 million at most, and possibly with an opt-out offer for the player and the team if things don't go the way that they want.
Quick reminder here. Thanks to G Money Stacks for these key dates. 11/19 to queue qualifying offers can make their decision. Owners meeting 11/19 to the 21st. Non-tender deadline November 22nd. Draft picks assigned December 1st. The winter meetings, which will be huge. I think by that point we'll find out where Juan Soto is going, and that'll kickstart most of the offseason. Remember, last winter meetings was a bore fest, and nothing happened at all. So that's December 8th to the 11th, and then you have the rules draft, which will also be on December 11th. Thanks to G Money Stacks for putting that in the chat. I think for me, the Mets really have to go after Sean Minaya. I think he turned the corner last season in the second half after learning the new delivery that he picked up from Chris Sale. And he carried it throughout the second half of the season. He seems to really love playing here in New York. You saw at the end of the season, kind of ran out of gas there. And even in the post-game press conference, the tears just not being able to get the Mets through. But I think Sean Manaea, if I'm offering the multi-year deal, especially when you're trying to allocate your money elsewhere, I think Sean Manaea is the guy I go after over Luis Severino.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he was a part. Obviously, he had that stretch of like 6 weeks where he was, unbeatable and obviously going deep into games. Whereas I feel like Luis Severino, he kind of hit a wall in mid August after his complete game shutout on the OMG T-shirt day. He kind of had some clunkers in there, but Manaea really had an amazing second half, and I think you're talking about guys who haven't thrown more than 170, 180 innings back to back. So I think it happens that guys are going to run out of gas when you're expecting them to go that long when they're not building that up from one season to the next. It'll be interesting to see what next year looks like and how he builds up and is able to finish strong towards the back half if we get that far. But I definitely want him back, and I'd love to have both him and Severino back. Let's run it back with the two of them. But obviously think that there's only but so much money that we can spend, and we have some possible trades because we have a lot of chips in our minor league system that look like they're close to being major league ready. That we can go after, let's say a guy like Shea, but I know that he's going to cost a lot because of the amount of control that he gives a team that's acquiring him. Plus, he also wants an extension. So, definitely Manaea is like my number one target, like after Burns. But I definitely would love to have Severino back too because I think they're the 1-2 punch that they had, and plus their chemistry together, like with them putting their numbers under their eye blacks and all that stuff, like that type of camaraderie, like you don't find very often in a pitching staff.
Yeah, and I someone said it in the chat, Sportsnut Nick, who's going to hold the OMG sign if Severino's not here?
I saw that sign. That's a great question. Who knows? I think if we have Tyler McGill, he seems to like the sign, but I don't know. I feel like Severino was a bulldog for us, and Tyler McGill, I mean, he's I think still figuring it out. I'd love to see him.
You got David Peterson as well. I don't know what the status is of Paul Blackburn, but we know that Senga, and even Senga is a question mark because his health has not been 100%. So I do see the Mets signing at least one top line pitcher and maybe trading for another one, whether it's Garrett Crochet or someone else that we haven't heard of, because the Mets keep, especially when it comes to trades, they've really kept things under the vest there and surprised us with trades. I know it didn't work out last year, but they did trade for Adrian Hauser, hoping he'd be, back end of the rotation guy, along with bringing in Tyrone Taylor. David Smith saying he hopes Severino Manaea's asking price will be reasonable. I think it'll be reasonable to get at least one of these guys, like we mentioned before. Jonathan saying maybe sign Roki Sasaki as well as Kikuchi. That's possible option. I know Kikuchi's probably going to get around the same type of deal I think that Manaea is when you look at what he did last season. Yeah, I think when he got traded to Houston, he pitched very well. So you're looking at two guys that are also options. The Sasaki deal is a little bit different, especially different than Yamamoto. He can only be signed to a minor league deal, which helps the Mets, but also helps the team like the Dodgers as well. Yeah. So I don't know how close that is. There's another guy that I want to bring up because someone brought this up to me in a Facebook group. A Facebook friend of mine, Steven Steele, asked me about a guy like Jordan Montgomery. Now, I know he had an awful season last year, but I promised to address this, during the podcast today. Could he be an option? He just exercised his option for 2025, so he'll be paid kind of around the qualifying offer, a little bit over, about $1 million over, $22.5 million. But it looks like the Diamondbacks are very interested in trading him. Last season, 8-7, he had a 6.23 ERA. If you remember, he got signed. I don't know if it was towards the end I think actually it was mid-season he got signed. He was one of the Boris guys that did not get signed earlier on in spring training. But he's pitched in New York with the Yankees. He's had great postseason stats. You saw what he did in Texas when they went to the World Series. Would you be interested in trading for him? Is Montgomery, worth kind of taking a peek at?
I think so. I mean, because for all the things you just said, I mean, he has pitched in New York. He has been playoff tested, and you can't just you can't also fault the player for a down year. Arizona is a tough place to pitch. That ballpark inflates ERAs like no one else, and then that starts affecting how you're trying to compensate because you're trying to make the back of your baseball card more appealing. I find Jordan Montgomery to be a very intriguing thing because his price also has gotten driven down by his owner, who basically said this was a bad investment that I pushed for. So I don't think it's going to cost a lot. So I would definitely swim in that pool a little bit and figure out, what it would take to get him, because that just adds a complimentary pitcher to the rotation, which, you're not expecting him to be a top 3 starter. And if you're going to get the value, I think it's a high, a low risk, high reward kind of situation for us. And I would definitely do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Low risk, high reward. I'm pretty sure David Stearns, Jeremy Hefner would be itching at the bit to get to him and see what they could tweak. And you saw the success that they had with guys like Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, even to a certain extent, Jose Quintana in the second half. I mean, the guy only gave up 3 earned runs in all of September. You look at David Peterson coming back from hip surgery and the season that he had. So there's been that success with the Mets and Hefner and the pitching lab and what they can do. Pitching in Arizona, like you said, is hard. Coming in halfway through a season, that's hard as well for a pitcher at the very least. You have that routine, you have that program that you need on a daily and a weekly basis. And he wasn't. I'm pretty sure he was training, but not to that high level that you think you would have to, if you're getting ready to start in spring training and there are games that really don't matter then. Whereas during the midseason, you're really coming into the thick of things. So, he struggled mightily there, but that's definitely a guy that I would 100% be looking into, especially at the price point, especially it being for 1 year only. So it's, like I said, it's kind of like taking a guy with a qualifying offer. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that'll work out if the Mets were able to do that. Obviously, that's not the only move they should make when it comes to the starting pitching, and they'll have to really rebuild the rotation again like they did last year. But as we saw with David Stearns, I have full confidence that that's something that he can do. He knows how to put together a bullpen as well. And hopefully, they can get this pitching staff in order. Kind of got really tired at the end of the season. And with a year under their belt, Jordan Montgomery being healthy, guy like Sean Manaea finally getting full season. Even if you look at Luis Severino, I think that's something that happens. Before we wrap up the show, I always like to do a little bit of news and happenings surrounding this team. Carlos Mendoza, manager of the year finalist, that took the Mets to the NLCS 89 and 73, which was third in the National League East. But like I said, made the wild card. You look at the rest of the candidates here. Obviously, Pat Murphy took the Milwaukee Brewers to the National League Central Division title. 93 and 69. But you look at the record the year before, they didn't really lose a beat. 1 game better, 92 and 70 last year. Mike Schilt, who took over for Bob Melvin in San Diego, had them second in the National League West, 93 and 69, as in 2023, they're 82 and 80. A lot of people are saying Pat Murphy is the runaway winner here. I don't tend to agree with that. You look at the way the team played last year, they really didn't miss a beat. They changed some players around, but they played hard for him. To me, I think it's Mike Schilt and Carlos Mendoza here. You look at how the team's turned around, especially in season for Carlos Mendoza here. I think he has a good shot at winning this.
I think he has a good shot, but I think it's going to either Murphy or Schilt. I think San Diego's second half performance was I mean, the amount of games that they came back from and trusting in a rookie to play center field and having a monster season in Jackson Merrill, and how that perennially disappointing franchise, when they load up with stars, hasn't been able to kind of put it together. And honestly, I think if they had beaten the Dodgers, we would have had a really tough task of having to handle them in the NLCS. So um, I think it's I think it's Schultz.
Yeah, if I had to pick not Carlos Mendoza between Murphy and Schilt, I would go with Schilt as well. Murphy did such a great job replacing Craig Counsell, who went to Chicago. But I look at these three. I don't know when the last time was like three. I'm not gonna say first year manager. Obviously, that's Carlos Mendoza, but first year with their team. Being
Yeah.
taking them and being a part of what is the manager of the year. That's an accomplishment on its own. The other thing was Francisco Lindor, MVP finalist. I don't think it's going to happen. I wish it would, but even him getting hurt towards the end of the season, I don't think that was going to change what happened with Shohei Ohtani. 54 home runs, 59 stolen bases, the first player to ever do that. We know that Francisco Lindor was the most valuable, especially to the Mets team, coming up clutch in so many big opportunities. But I think Shohei Ohtani is pretty much a lock. I would love it to be Lindor, especially for the defense that he provides, but I don't think he's going to get over Shohei Ohtani here. Also, Ketel Marte is in the conversations as well, but Lindor's stats were a little bit better than Marte's.
Yeah, I think Lindor is going to be number 2 in this case, but which, I mean, they've really have to look at the award and decide, what a player is. Are we going to award a DH because, David Ortiz as a DH put up monster numbers in earlier in this millennium, and he wasn't awarded MVP because it was supposed to be a player's award. So I feel like a lot of things are being rewritten to keep Shohei happy and to keep this international appeal that we're trying to grow even more. And it's great for baseball, but I think that certain awards should just be based on what they are. And a player is somebody who plays on both sides of the field, and that's it, at least to me. But Shohei's offensive numbers, you can't argue that they were the best in baseball, or among the best in baseball. No one's ever done what he's done. So, and he's done it with I mean, I know it's not his hitting elbow, but obviously having Tommy John surgery, he's doing that with dealing with an injury and trying to rehab and work his way back to pitching form. So, he's a unicorn, and
we got to also think too, with him pitching, if he returns to pitching, that he won't have as many stolen bases. They won't have him running the bases like he did last year. Especially now with him getting hurt in the World Series, I think they're going to probably tell him, all right, you got to slow it down a little bit with the stealing of the bases. But definitely probably the biggest lock is for him to win this. Like you said, there should be another reward for guys like this. The defense component is so big, I think, for these players, even a guy like Ketel Marte as well. You look at what they provide at their positions, and to see that kind of get neglected, I think is just a shame that they do that. But Lindor will win an award here. He's got the Silver Slugger, 4th of his career. He won 2 in Cleveland. He wins 2 with the Mets, 2017, 2018, 2023, 2024, beat out Ellie De La Cruz and Willie Adames of all things. So congratulations on that. One final note, Keith Hernandez, Cat passed away. Haji, we all know him, always being a big part of him talking about the Mets and stuff like that. He was 22 years old. So rest in peace to Haji the Cat. Jay, this has been such a great episode to do with you. It's been a long time coming. I've been trying to get you on. I know you've been traveling with the team. You've been a part of so much stuff, and it's finally great to have you on Subway to Shea. Let everyone know what you got going on, what you're working on, and obviously reiterate, where everyone can find you.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the next weekend, we're going to be doing the Jose Iglesias OMG signing over at Woodbridge Brewery. So you could find me there next Saturday, and then I'm doing the QBC in December. But I'm still available for commissions. You can find me at jmackcustoms.com. You can find me at jmackcustoms on Twitter, jmackcustoms on Instagram. We have Christmas ornaments that we just put up on the website. Not the 3D printed ones that you're seeing run wild on the internet, but a much higher quality metal one that I'm really excited about. They'll be arriving probably the first week of December. They'll be finished being produced, and I'll ship those out. But those are still available. Pins are still available, and I think today's the last day that you could order OMG signs for me to get them in time for Christmas if you celebrate Christmas or the holidays.
That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. And I will see you out there at the QBC. I will be a part of the State of the Mets panel with Mike Silva from Talking Mets, Uno G. Kelly Thorpe will be in there as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun to be at the QBC. If you've never gone to the QBC, you should be out there. Jeff Cohen asking, will you be bringing pins and ornaments to the QBC?
If the ornaments are in hand, they're going to come with me. But I am bringing a ton of pins, Jeff. So that's a great question. I'll have them there, and I'm going to probably do a special QBC offer that day as well. So stay tuned. I'll see you there.
Awesome stuff. Jay, I can't thank you much more for doing this. I mean, this was a fun episode for me. Congratulations again on getting the sign to the Hall of Fame and all that brings with it. I hope to see so many signs at Citi Field next year. Let's bring that aura back, at least the OMG part. Let's bring that back for 2025, and let's get to a World Series, man. Let's celebrate a World Series next year.
Absolutely.
I think we're in agreement with that, right?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the work that you've done. And, I've obviously watched a lot of what you do from afar, but to actually be here and be on a panel with you, having, shooting the breeze, I think it's really cool. So thanks for what you do in the community, and thanks for, letting me be on your platform. So I'll see you soon.
Appreciate the kind words. 333 people in the room with us live. Thank you so much for joining the chat and for being a part of this. Make sure you're following at JMac Customs. Make sure you're liking and subscribing to Subway to Shea. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea, at Aunt Rivera 86 as well, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That'll be up later if you want to listen to the show. And make sure, like I said, you are subscribing on YouTube. For me, Anthony Rivera, and for JMac Customs, this has been Subway to Shea. And always remember, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.